Welcome to Bitcoin Made Clear. If you're looking for a simple way to learn about Bitcoin, you're in the right place. Before we jump in, here's what to expect. In Chapter 1, we'll talk about Bitcoin origins, specifically why we moved from old forms of money to paper money to digital money. In Chapter 2, we'll discuss Bitcoin fundamentals, like its role as the first major digital asset, the technology behind Bitcoin, and the value and use cases of Bitcoin in daily life. Last, we'll close out with Chapter 3, which is all about Bitcoin ownership, specifically obtaining and storing Bitcoin. Join us in the next video for a quick meet and greet before we dive in. So first of all, it's great to meet you. My name is Jessica and I'll be leading you through this program. Since we'll be spending some time together, here's a bit about me and my co-founder Joseph, who's the brains behind the technical content in this course. After 10 years working for companies like Cisco and Texas Instruments, I founded a small personal finance education business, and it did not take me long to discover Bitcoin, which ultimately led me to relocate from Texas to El Salvador when El Salvador adopted Bitcoin as legal tender. Joseph and I met in business school at the University of Texas at Austin, and while also from Texas, you'll find him on the other side of the world living in Southeast Asia. He began his professional journey as a cybersecurity consultant with PricewaterhouseCoopers, eventually becoming a manager at Robinhood Crypto. He also spent time in legal operations at Meta, which you probably know as Facebook and Instagram. And to top it off, he holds a master's degree specializing in artificial intelligence. Joseph and I believe crypto is here to stay, and like any new technology, it can be confusing at first. So our goal is to keep it interesting and clear. It's almost time to dive in. Just one more message in the next video before you start learning about crypto. This final welcome message is an important one. One of the biggest reasons people fail to reach their goals is because they lose momentum or they lack clarity on what to do next. So here's what we would like you to do to make sure that doesn't happen. Let's kick things off with a quick win. Specifically, we would like you to create a crypto exchange account, which is commonly used to buy and sell crypto. For our examples, we'll be using Coinbase. CryptoLearn is not an affiliate of Coinbase, and we receive no gain, financial or otherwise, by sharing information about their tools. We simply must choose a platform for our demonstrations, and we like Coinbase. In the course, we'll explain in more depth exactly what a crypto exchange is and the specifics of why you might use one, so don't worry about that just yet. Just know you will need this later to follow along in the course, and it can take a bit of time for the verification process to complete. Coinbase is currently the leader in the crypto exchange space and one of the most highly regulated financial institutions in the industry. That being said, please remember that everything in this course is for educational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. Always do your own research and consider consulting a financial professional before making any investment decisions, as every financial situation is unique. If you prefer to simply follow along for now and create an account later, that is perfectly okay too. You can revisit this video at any time. But if you'd like to get set up so you can progress through the course without any delay, here's how to create your Coinbase account. Because Coinbase may change their process at any time, we'll go through the basics together here, but don't worry, you can get the specifics in our Getting Started one-pager. You'll be able to access the one-pager in the lesson immediately following this video. At a high level, here's how to create your Coinbase account. Simply download the Coinbase app, select Create Account, and follow the steps. When you search for the Coinbase app, you'll notice both Coinbase the Exchange, which is the first app pictured here, as well as the Coinbase Wallet, which is the second app. Feel free to download both as you'll be learning about each throughout the course. However, prioritize the Exchange first. If you want to participate in our follow along demo, please take the time to download your Coinbase Exchange account now so the verification process can begin while you work through the initial chapters. And don't forget, you can grab the Getting Started one-pager in the next lesson if you need it. We'll see you in the next video. Let's kick things off by asking ourselves where money came from and how we've moved from one form of money to another. Centuries ago, cowrie shells were highly valued in Africa due to their rarity and utility as currency. However, when European traders realized their value in African markets, they began importing cowrie shells in large quantities from other places where shells were abundant. As the market flooded with cowrie shells, this led to inflation and their value inevitably fell. Although the number of shells increased, the things people wanted to buy with them did not. As a result, it took more and more shells to buy the same goods as before, causing major disruptions in local African economies, and eventually the shells' abundance made them less desirable as money and they stopped being used. This example highlights the importance of scarcity when it comes to money. In other words, why money needs to remain limited, difficult to create, and hard to copy. And although we're used to thinking of money as paper bills, this shows that money can be anything that enables us to store value, buy things, and price goods and services. So to recap, 2 key takeaways are, number 1, the importance of scarcity, and number 2, that money does not have to be paper bills. Now, after various trials and errors throughout history, ranging from glass beads and large stones to cows and cigarettes, much of the world eventually adopted a monetary system of coins made from gold. Even today, gold has maintained its value, and a key reason is because of scarcity. It's not too abundant, and there's no feasible way to create more of it. However, as financial markets evolved, the amount of coins needed for certain transactions grew to a point where the gold became physically hard to carry. For example, in ancient China, the Chinese threaded coins on strings. A strand of only 1,000 coins already weighed about 10 pounds, and as the economy matured, merchants were needing tens or even hundreds of thousands of coins. So the government proposed a solution. They said, how about you give us your gold for safekeeping and we'll give you a document that says the amount of gold we're holding for you. Whenever you want your gold, just bring in your note and we will give you the amount of gold written on it. This is where the term promissory note comes from. It's a promise from the government, essentially an IOU, that whenever you give them your note, they'll return your gold to you. Over time, merchants realized that these slips of paper were always good and that they could be turned in at any time for gold, so why even turn them in? Why not just trade the slips of paper? So merchants began using these government IOUs as money. This idea spread around the world, and that's how we ended up with the paper bills we know today. In the US, they're called dollars, in Europe, euros, and so on. Now, based on this, for every bill in the economy, there should be an equal amount of gold stored at the banks, and you should be able to take your dollars or your euros or whatever to the bank and trade them for an equal amount of gold that you've placed there for safekeeping. But that's not how things work anymore. The system I just described, where banks would literally trade paper notes for gold, is known as the gold standard, and that meant the amount of gold in the bank vaults matched exactly the amount written on all of the paper bills circulating in the economy. Well, what's happened over time is banks began issuing more IOUs into the economy than the gold that they physically store. Some refer to this as money printing, and many ask why governments would do this. There are different reasons, but here's one for context. In 1971, President Nixon took the US off the gold standard to fund the war in Vietnam. The war was becoming unpopular, so raising taxes to fund the war would have likely received a negative response. So instead, the Nixon administration took the US off the gold standard so that they could print the money that they needed. Some thought, well, at least taxes didn't go up, but there's a larger issue. Think back to what happened in Africa. When there was suddenly an increase in currency without an increase in goods, this led to inflation and ultimately the devaluation of their currency. In our economy, it works the same way. When there's suddenly an increase in currency without an increase in goods, prices start to increase and currencies start to lose their value. This is where crypto can become helpful, but before we dig in, there's a relevant concept to understand: centralization versus decentralization. The financial system I've just described is known as a fiat system. Fiat money is government-issued currency that is not backed by a physical, valuable good like gold. And fiat financial systems are centralized, which means that the authority is unified in one place. For example, in the US, that centralized authority is the Federal Reserve. The Fed can create more US dollars, which means the value of the US dollar is directly tied to this central authority. Fun fact, Most US dollars today are not created physically like this, but rather digitally like this. Over 90% of US dollars in circulation exist as numbers in bank accounts or other financial systems without corresponding physical bills. So when you hear the term money printing, it's less about physically printing cash and more about updating numbers on a screen. And that's how new money gets into circulation in our centralized model. Now, unlike the Fed, which is a single authority, a decentralized system spreads the decision-making across multiple people or entities, and it's foundational to the first major cryptocurrency to appear on the scene in 2009. And that's where our conversation about crypto begins, with Bitcoin.